for confirmation of good orbital insertion for ship today.
It has been a very exciting afternoon so far. We'd like to send it back over to Dan, who can give us that live view experience.
So we're watching onboard cameras, onboard Starship, the largest rocket ever made. What we also saw was a water touchdown of Super Heavy, Starship's first stage booster. You might remember last month it fell into those giant mechanical arms at the launch site, the chopsticks. It is a key step in its reusable design. They had hoped to repeat it today. Elon Musk had written he wanted it to be faster and harder. Looks like Elon Musk and Donald Trump are on the move, possibly, or they've changed locations anyway. A VIP view, no doubt, for the president-elect. But let's bring in Tom Clark once again. You know, talk us through the fact that the president is there, Tom, but also what we're witnessing now and what happens to Starship from this point on.
Yeah, I think just first dealing with the fact that they didn't stick the landing. You know, SpaceX is very much in their culture, and I think of any engineer, any sort of experimental scientist or engineer, it's good to fail. That's how you learn lessons. You celebrate your failures as much as your successes. Elon Musk has certainly put that on record. But I cannot for a second believe there's not a lot of disappointment for Elon Musk, for SpaceX. This was their moment to show their prowess in efficiency, reusability, the fail-fast efficiency that Donald Trump really wants his presidency to embody. Also, Donald Trump isn't somebody who likes to be associated with things that don't look brilliant and work amazingly. He saw Test 5 just a month ago. He spoke about it on the campaign trail, how much it was, how much of an incredible event it was. He wanted to be down here to witness that event again, to be associated with Elon Musk's success and glory, and that hasn't happened. And I think that's actually going to be quite significant, despite the cheers at their failure to do the landing. They still demonstrated they could bring that booster back down in the right sort of configuration. I'm sure they've learned a lot from an engineering point of view, but this is different. This was a flight test with a political moment tagged onto it, and I think it would have been not the outcome that any party wanted to see. In terms of the test, though, let's get back to the space science and the engineering. It put the Starship into a perfect orbit. Its engines are off. It's now in cruise phase, and in about 55 minutes, an hour's time, it'll be splashing down.
Well, let's bring in our US correspondent, Martha Kellner, who's on South Padre Island in Texas. The deck chairs out in the blue sky this afternoon. You know, an amazing sight for all to see, despite that disappointment about the catch moment, Martha.
Yeah, it really is an incredible spectacle, Anna. As that rocket takes off, around 10 seconds after it takes off, there's this enormous boom. It almost sounds like an incredibly large engine backfiring right next to you. So even though they didn't see the moment that they'd been waiting for, this chopsticks manoeuvre of the rocket launchers coming back into land, people here seemed pretty impressed anyway. I'm sure Elon Musk would have liked his big moment with the president-elect Donald Trump alongside him, Texas Senator Ted Cruz as well, Donald Trump Jr. there. I'm sure Elon Musk would have liked to have seen that chopstick manoeuvre completed successfully, but this is just the 6th test of many flights to come. Elon Musk has said he wants 25 of these launches to happen next year. He may very well be able to achieve that because his new role in Donald Trump's administration means he may be able to circumvent some of that red tape which has prevented him from doing so many launches this year and in previous years. I'm joined by Jasmine, who's 16 years old. You live nearby. You've already seen 4 of these launches.
Yes, so I've been to about 4 of these. I did come to the most recent one where it was the chopstick, and that was a pretty fun experience. I came with my family who is here watching me right now. And I'd say that although today wasn't as successful as we wanted it to be, it was still a great experience, and it was cool to see all the people here and everyone just come conjoined and be together.
And this is tied in with politics as well, isn't it? Because Donald Trump is here today. Are you also a supporter, your family supporters of Donald Trump?
Yes, we are very big supporters. A lot of people know us as big supporters.
And do you think that the relationship between Donald Trump and Elon Musk might mean that we see more of these launches in the future?
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. I think that since Donald Trump is now going to be president for the next 4 years, he's definitely going to be helping out with Elon Musk and supporting everything that Elon Musk is going to be doing.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Jasmine.
Thank you so much.
There have been concerns from environmental activists about the environmental impact of these launches. That launch pad in Boca Chica is surrounded by a national park and a federal wildlife reserve. And in fact, one of the recent launches expelled so much sand and rocks into the surrounding area that it destroyed a nesting area for migrating birds. There are also concerns from the Environmental Protection Agency about the damage it does to water in the local area as well, from the huge amount of energy expelled from these launches. Elon Musk will be hoping that the fact that he has Donald Trump's ear, the fact that he is now a co-chair of this Department of Government Efficiency, means he can get past the people that he calls the pen pushers to increase the number of these launches. He's made no secret that he hopes that this Starship rocket can eventually go to Mars, and the fact that his new closeness with the president-elect may help him expedite that process.
25 of these next year, Martha. We'll do it twice a month, I think, by the look of it. In the meantime, let's have a final thought from Tom. Elon Musk himself has said there are thousands of small design changes being tested in these launches, Tom. But what happens now to Starship, and what else might we see?
Well, you may have seen it, a slightly odd glimpse there of a banana floating inside its payload. So that's... basically, they fitted it out with the same carriers that would carry Starlink satellites that could be deployed rapidly from the payload bay of that Starship spacecraft. That's a commercial aim they have for that craft. Don't forget, they also want to demonstrate its ability to take humans into orbit, humans beyond orbit, onto the moon or even Mars in Elon Musk's vision. But they've got a lot to prove with that spacecraft. They've got lots of monitors inside it. They're looking particularly at the heat shields that go on it. Unlike the space shuttle, which just had a very inert hull, the Starship has flaps on it for controlling. Those allow the hot plasma during re-entry to get in. There's been problems with them in the last few tests, although they seem to be improving. So there's going to be a lot to learn from the re-entry of this Starship that will be really informative in terms of developing it. And then those later tests this year, what we expect, what we hope to see, is their ability to land Starship next to its booster on that same platform back in Boca Chica where it took off from, to demonstrate the reusability of both the booster and the Starship itself. It's not refined enough yet, that's why it's splashing down in the Indian Ocean, but in subsequent tests they want to make it do a full orbit of the Earth and come right back to where it started and land Starship next to its booster in those mechanical grabbers, and Starship would land itself on the concrete next to it. That's the plan, and this is another step towards it.
Tom and Martha earlier, thanks to both of you. Watching pictures there of the VIP showing for the President-elect Donald Trump with Elon Musk, creator of SpaceX, obviously. Plenty more tests to come, and we await what happens to Starship this evening as well. More coverage of that later this evening. In the meantime, let's bring you the rest of the day's news. And whether you agree with Russia's assessment that it marks a qualitatively new phase, Ukraine's first firing of advanced American missiles into Russia is certainly a moment for pause. It is unlikely to be a coincidence that today President Putin approved a change in the country's rules over nuclear weapons, making it officially easier to approve their use. Well, the Russian Defense Ministry says Ukraine fired the ATACMS missiles at a target in the Bryansk region, a claim that Ukraine has not confirmed. In a moment, we'll take you to Kyiv, where our chief correspondent Stuart Ramsey has been speaking to those living amidst the conflict. But first, our Moscow correspondent Ivor Bennett has this report as Russia raises the stakes.
In the early hours of Tuesday morning, an assault that now has the world on edge. According to Moscow, this military facility in the Bryansk region was hit by US-supplied missiles. It's believed to be the first time Ukraine has fired Western weapons deep inside Russia. At the G20 summit in Brazil, Russia's foreign minister said the missiles mean America's involvement.
They are operated by American experts, military experts. And we will be taking this as a qualitatively new phase of the Western war against Russia, and we'll react accordingly.
So how could Russia react? Today, an apparent clue from the Kremlin. Vladimir Putin approved changes to Russia's nuclear doctrine, making it easier to reach for the red button. In theory, Moscow could now launch a nuclear strike. US missiles fired by Ukraine meets the new threshold. The Kremlin blames Washington for escalating the conflict. But the only one threatening nuclear force here is Russia. And Russia's also the one who started this conflict by invading its neighbour. At Moscow's Victory Park, though, the focus was on a different war, the Soviet Union's defeat of Nazi Germany. Authorities discussed plans for next year's 80th anniversary. But there was no mention of the 1,000-day milestone in Russia's current conflict, which was supposed to be over in a matter of weeks. Is it embarrassing for Russia, or a failure even, that it's lasted this long?
Специальные военные операции есть задачи.
The special military operation has its tasks and they will be accomplished. When that happens depends on you in Western countries.
The Kremlin wants Russians to view the Ukraine conflict as an existential struggle akin to World War II, and it seems to be working.
I don't think this war is going on for a long time. We should fight to the last.
No one promised us several weeks. It's all Ukrainian disinformation. We immediately understood who we were up against and who we'll be fighting.
The question is, where does this end? The stakes only get higher. Ivor Bennett, Sky News, Moscow.
Ukraine's President Zelensky said today that Russia must be forced to reach a just peace. He was speaking 1,000 days after the beginning of the war. Leader of a country where the attacks from Russian forces on military and civilian targets continue. Our chief correspondent, Stuart Ramsey, has this report from Kyiv.
The 1,000th day and just 32 minutes in, air raid sirens and a missile strike. A blaze glowing red in the night skies near the capital, Kyiv. Energy infrastructure is the target. It's already led to widespread rolling power cuts. Some streets in darkness. Only those with generators can power their lights. 1,000 days of war with no end in sight. Beneath Ukraine's motherland statue, a military vigil. Soldiers remembering their lost comrades in a war that has claimed the lives of tens of thousands, an attrition rate that Ukraine is struggling to deal with. Marking the day, President Zelensky addressed the European Parliament, imploring them to support his country.
While some European leaders think about, some elections or something like this at Ukraine's expense, Putin is focused on winning this war. He will not stop on his own. The more time he has, the worse the conditions become.
Boxes of drones for the military, communication equipment, night sights, all destined for the front line. They await collection in the offices of the Sergei Prytula Foundation. Ukraine is dependent on weapons from the West, particularly long-range weapons, but all this equipment comes from the foundation and from donations. Mr. Prytula's team has raised $200 million in this last 1,000 days for a war, he says, that must continue.
Just imagine what they will do with Ukrainians after 1,000 days of our fighting for our independence if they made such horrible things with our civilian people, with our women, with our kids on the first few months of occupation. So that's why we have a lot of reasons to not give up and to fight.
It's striking that one can barely pass a town or village cemetery across this country without the blue and gold colours of the Ukrainian flag punctuating the grey skies, marking the graves of the war dead. 1,000 days have passed, but it is just another day in this war. Stuart Ramsey, Sky News, Kyiv.
Britain's best-known farmer called on the government to be big and back down over its changes to inheritance tax for the profession. Jeremy Clarkson, who had previously said avoiding the tax was one of the reasons he had bought his own farm, was joining thousands of others protesting in Westminster. The Environment Secretary, Steve Reed, told us though he loved the TV star show, he was listening to the wrong data about the number of farmers affected. Our West of England correspondent Dan Whitehead reports.
They came from all corners of the country. More than 10,000 farmers brought Whitehall to a standstill, hoping their message to overturn the new inheritance tax rule is heard loud and clear.
How do you feel about the government and this plan? Because Labour promised not to do this in the new election.
It did.
How do you feel?
It's disappointing. It's sad. We want to pay taxes. We're OK with that, but to impact us so greatly, and it's disappointing.
It just feels like a kick in the teeth.
You know, our job and our way of life is to feed people and to look after the environment. It's something we've been doing for years. So, that's all we want to do. We don't want to empty the shelves, but if it comes to it, then that's what's going to happen.
Jeremy, what's your word to the government? Your life on start. Please back down.
He has become the celebrity voice for the sector. TV presenter come farmer Jeremy Clarkson, insisting the government needs to perform a U-turn.
For the sake of everybody here, and for all the farmers who are stuck at home today, paralysed by a fog of despair over what's been foisted upon them, I beg of the government to be big, to accept that this was rushed through, it wasn't thought out, and it's a mistake. That's the big thing to do, admit it, and back down.
Little chance of that happening. The government doubling down on its numbers, insisting there'll be no change in policy.
I think the farmers have been told things that have alarmed them. Part of my job is to show them why the figures that we are using are reliable. Now, what we've done is we've got those figures based on hard data, actual claims on point of death from the last year that those figures were available.
This is the biggest protest that farmers have held in years, and they say that if the government doesn't back down over this, they will be back, and it may not be as peaceful.
Farming strikes and further protests may be on the cards. They insist the next generation may not be able to take over for real if this budget proposal goes through. As they head back to the countryside, there's little sign of a clear road ahead. Dan Whitehead, Sky News, in Westminster.
Well, the Prime Minister insisted today he is not engaging in class war and his government's decisions over farmers as well as over VAT on private schools. He was speaking to our political editor, Beth Rigby, at the G20 summit.
Prime Minister, your budget's backfiring back home. Over 15,000 farmers descending on London angry at inheritance tax changes. You insist the tax only hits landowning couples once the 3 million threshold is hit. You think wealthy landowners need to pay more tax?
Well, I want to support farming. It's very important that we do so, and that's why in the budget we put down £5 billion over the next 2 years into farming, into food sustainability. That's the biggest sum of money that's ever been put into farming.
Landowners
so far as inheritance tax is concerned, in a typical case, as you rightly say, which is a family wanting to pass on to one of their children, so a classic case, that's a £3 million threshold.
But you think wealthy landowners should pay more tax?
Meeting the concern of the farmers, what I would say, and this is important, the vast majority, therefore, will be unaffected by this. Where people are over that threshold, that's a small number of cases, the tax is 20%, so half of what everybody else pays, and it's payable over 10 years. But I would also just add this, which is...
Do you think they should pay more tax?
Let me just add this, because I do think it's important. I grew up, obviously, in a rural area. And I know that in rural areas, in farming communities, they need good hospitals, they need good schools, and they need houses that people can afford. And that's what we invest in the budget.
So you think wealthy landowners need to pay more for public services? That's where you're at?
Well, over the £3 million threshold, then that's where we've said the balance is right to start paying at that lower rate of 20%.
In your tax decisions, you've targeted people who send their kids to private schools, people who earn income from assets, landowners, small business owners. There's a pattern here. Is it a class war for you?
No, absolutely not.
It's not a class war?
No, it's not. And let me just take one of those examples, which is the VAT on private schools. I do know that people watching this will save hard to send their child to a private school because they think that's the best thing for their child. But every single parent wants opportunity and aspiration for their child. And up until now, we haven't had the right number of teachers in basic subjects like maths, etc., in our state secondary schools. I'm not prepared to tolerate that for our state schools.
What's your message to wealthy people who thinks you are waging a class war against them? What's your message to them? Because that's how some people feel.
It isn't at all what we're doing. It's a balanced approach. We had to fill a black hole which was left by the last government. We had to make sure we stabilised our economy. And we've invested, and I think the vast majority of people know that we had to invest in our NHS, which was broken, in our schools to make sure every single child can go as far as their talent will take them, and in housing so that people can have a safe and secure roof over their head that they can afford, a sort of base camp for their dreams.
Sir Keir Starmer speaking there to Beth Rigby in Rio. Now, there are multiple warnings for snow and ice in place across the UK tonight after many areas saw snowfall and disruption at the start of the day. Yorkshire and parts of northern England saw snowy and icy conditions. An amber weather warning remains in place covering Yorkshire, the Midlands and the Humber, with severe conditions expected to persist. Meanwhile, a double-decker bus crashed into an empty house in the Stocksbridge area of Sheffield. The incident occurred during snowy weather, but no injuries were reported. And heavy snowfall last night brought disruption to Nottinghamshire, causing delays and closures. Wallerton Hall and Newstead Abbey were temporarily shut to assess weather impacts, prioritising visitor safety. And the snow also reached into the home counties and to London. Some areas of Buckinghamshire experienced heavy overnight snowfall, up to 15 centimetres of snow expected in some regions. Weather forecast a bit later, but that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's newspapers in the press preview. Tonight, joined by the political commentator, Benedict Spence, and the journalist and broadcaster, Jenny Kleeman. Welcome to both of you. Among the stories we will be discussing, this on the front of the Metro, its headline, Farmageddon. Back with that in just a moment.